Hello there, friends. Jacob here, and thank you so much for joining me for what is my first video in quite some time. Now, I'll do a little bit of housekeeping at the start here. I'm not going to go on and on and on, but I'll just say it's been kind of a busy year. I haven't quite had the time or the drive to do individual reviews, but make no mistake, I've been doing nothing but watch movies. And I've also been focusing a lot more on my new podcast called The Film Draft, co-hosted by a friend of the channel, Jaron. I'm sure you've seen him around here, but it's a podcast where each week us and a couple guests choose a film-related topic and do like a fantasy sports style draft where we take turns choosing teams of the best movies in that topic. And it's really, really fun. We love doing it. We drop a new episode every week, and you can find that on Spotify and Apple and wherever else you get your podcasts. So definitely go and follow that. You can follow us on Instagram at the Film Draft there too, and it's a good time. And that's where I've been putting most of my time and focus lately. And I was also lucky enough to go to North America for a month and go to the Toronto International Film Festival, which has always been a dream of mine. So while I wasn't making videos, I've been writing a lot of reviews and covering a lot of films. You can find all my reviews and stuff on my Instagram page, which is also in the description. But it's been a whirlwind of a year. I got to do a lot of really fun stuff, and I just had to put the YouTube videos on the back burner. But we are coming up to award season now, which, as I'm sure you all know, is my favorite time of the year. And I really enjoyed doing all these in-depth Oscar videos last year, so I'm going to get back into it now a little later than usual. But as we kick off November, and we've had the fall festivals, but we haven't quite gotten stuck into the precursor awards bodies, I think it's a good time for me to lodge my first Oscar predictions of the year. So we're going to go in-depth onto all 21 categories, 20. I'm not going to do the short film categories just yet because that's really anybody's guess. But I've got in-depth predictions for all the other categories above and below the line. So join me today. It's probably going to be a long one, but I'm really, really excited to get stuck into this. And compared to this time last year, I've actually seen just about all of the big contenders between TIFF and my local film festival that's just happened in Adelaide. I've seen almost everything, so I actually have things to talk about instead of just speculation. The only real major contenders I haven't seen yet are Maestro, which is yet to come out, and The Zone of Interest, which I wasn't able to see at TIFF. Too hard to get a ticket for that one. But I've seen most of the other major contenders, aside from the unknown ones that no one's seen yet, like Napoleon and The Color Purple. But yeah, it's been a pretty damn good year for film. I think it's a really, really fun award season, and I'm still Team Oppenheimer for picture. Whether it's my favorite film in the lineup, no, but it's a film that I'd be really happy with winning, and I think gun to my head, I still would predict it to win. It's been a juggernaut. I know it came out very early in the year, but I really don't think that's going to hurt it, and there's just an air of feeling like it is Christopher Nolan's year. Anything can happen, and early frontrunners can get taken down, but if I had to pick Best Picture right now, it's Oppenheimer. But I think we're looking at a big three this year: Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and Killers of the Flower Moon. A lot of people weren't really gung-ho on Poor Things up until it premiered at Venice, and I was I've been on board with it the whole time. I bet big on it early in some little other prediction leagues I do, and it's coming to fruition. And I've seen the film twice now. I got to see it at the Adelaide Film Festival. It's one of my favorite films of the year for sure, and I would love to see it win. And I think it can win because it's proving to be a major crowd pleaser. And that's been the drawback for Yorgos's other films. They're just a little bit alienating. The Favorite got 10 nominations and only one win. And I think it was pretty close to Best Picture that year, but the ending is a bit abstract and alienates people a little bit. Poor Things is a very bizarre film on the surface, but it's very easy to follow in terms of its themes and its story. I wouldn't say it challenges you. It's Yorgos's least challenging film for sure. And on top of that, it's just so visually inventive and delightfully funny and everything. And everyone I talked to so many people in my town who saw it at the Adelaide Film Festival, and it won the audience award there. It's a real crowd pleaser, and I think it absolutely can win Best Picture. And I think it's kind of between those two. I think Killers of the Flower Moon is going to be a juggernaut in terms of its nominations, but I don't really see it winning. In fact, I really don't see anything outside of that top two winning right now, but obviously anything can happen. It's only November. But Killers of the Flower Moon is going to get a ton of nominations. It's an incredible film from just this incredible late career run from Martin Scorsese, and I think you can lock that top three in. Then we come to The Holdovers, which I also feel is very, very safe. I got to see it at TIFF. It's a wonderful movie. It doesn't feel like the maudlin Oscar bait that it could have potentially been, and it's a big return of form for Alexander Payne. And I think once this comes out and more people see it, they're going to absolutely love it, and it's going to be pretty much undeniable. As with Barbie, I also think Barbie's going to be undeniable. Spoiler alert, it's still my favorite film of the year after seeing all these other contenders. And while I don't think it's going to win Best Picture, I think it's going to be solidly in there and get a lot of nominations. Like, it was a huge hit, and box office is sometimes a factor. It's not having a high box office isn't going to guarantee you Oscar nominations, but if you are sort of a critically acclaimed Oscar friendly movie, having a big box office is definitely going to help boost you further into that picture. And Maestro is from that bottom half of the Best Picture lineup, is where I don't think these ones are locks, but I still feel pretty confident in the next couple. And Maestro, I haven't seen it. It's gotten kind of mixed reviews. The Letterboxd scores are kind of negative, but I don't think that's going to play against the movie because those people are kind of predisposed against that. They smell the Oscar bait. They smell through the Oscar bait, whereas the critic reviews and audience reviews have been much, much more positive. It's got a potential Best Actor winner in Bradley Cooper and potentials for a number of other tech categories, which we're going to get into, but I think it could get nominations for things like sound and cinematography, screenplay, maybe another acting nomination in Carey Mulligan. So I think it's going to have enough of a package to really propel itself in there, unless the Academy just really do not like it, because having a somewhat negative reception doesn't hurt you that badly. Like, The Whale was pretty close to a Best Picture nomination. Don't Look Up got in, and that wasn't super well regarded. So you don't have to be well liked. And there have been films much less well received than Maestro that have gotten Best Picture nominations. So I think it's probably going to be in there. Anatomy of a Fall, I'm really confident about too. Some people got worried by France not submitting it, but I think it makes sense. Half the film's in English, so that probably played into them not choosing it. And also, by all accounts, The Taste of Things is a major, major crowd pleaser. But I still think Anatomy of a Fall is going to get a decent package of nominations, including Best Picture. It's a really entertaining film, and for a foreign film, it's really populist. It's kind of a popcorn movie in that you're watching this fun courtroom drama unfold. There's so much great dialogue, juicy, meaty performances. I'm really confident about this getting in there. Less confident, but still pretty confident, The Zone of Interest. I've heard a lot of mixed things about this one, not in terms of its reception, but in terms of its Oscar buzz. I know someone who says it's not going to get anything. It's too weird. It's too alienating. But it's also the best reviewed film of the year. If you look at Metacritic and things like that, it is incredibly acclaimed, and there are so many people who are not just saying it's like a great film, but it's game changing. It does something new. I haven't been able to see it yet, so I can't weigh in on this little debate. But these are the three spots that I do feel are a little more up for grabs. But it feels like Zone of Interest and Past Lives are A24's biggest contenders this year. They may not both get in, but if one studio is getting two in, I do kind of back A24, and I do think Zone of Interest has the acclaim. It's likely going to win Best Foreign Film, and it also is likely going to get a director nomination because they always go for an art house one, and Glazer feels like the move in that category this year. American Fiction is one that's kind of rocketed up. It shocked everybody by winning the Audience Award at TIFF, and if you know stats, that almost always leads to a Best Picture nomination. Now, I saw American Fiction at TIFF. I absolutely loved it. I totally get why it won the Audience Award. It's such a funny film that has some really, really interesting things to say about art and identity. It also didn't scream Best Picture nominee to me when I saw it. I was hesitant to predict it, but looking at where the chips are all falling and looking at the lineup, I do think it's a better bet than some of these ones that are just outside of the 10, and it's going to be a real crowd pleaser, and it also has some other potential nominations, including definitely adapted screenplay. Past Lives, unfortunately, feels like it's falling by the wayside a little bit. I finally got to see it while I was in New York City, which was the perfect place to watch that movie. I really liked it, not as much as everyone else, but it is a very low-key movie, and I can see it being forgotten about by a lot of voters, but there's going to be a large contingent of people who will not shut up about Past Lives. I think it's going to do pretty well with critics groups, and I don't think it's going to be shut out completely, but I am starting to think it's at risk of missing that Best Picture nomination. I've still got it in there for now because it is so many people's favorite movie of the year, but I would say that 8, 9, 10 slot, these are the ones where it's kind of up for grabs. And as we look at the rest of the board, The Color Purple is probably next in line. I'm not a huge believer in this movie. The trailer looks fun, and it could come out and be a banger, and we know the Oscars love musicals. It's coming from Oscar-winning source material, and we know the performances are gonna be looked at, so definitely not a crazy bet having that in Best Picture. I'm just until we actually see it, I'm not quite gonna throw it in there. I think Air is a chance. A lot of people have fallen off it, but I think that's a lot of people's favorite movie from the first half of the year, and we could see it being revived a little bit at critics groups and maybe the Critics' Choice Awards. And then Napoleon's the unknown. I've got Napoleon kind of on the cusp in a lot of categories because we don't really know which Ridley Scott we're going to get with it, whether it's good Ridley Scott or bad Ridley Scott. But if it's good, it absolutely could burst its way into one of those last three slots in Best Picture. From here, I'm less confident, so I'm not going to spend as much time talking about these ones, but Origin played pretty well at TIFF. It deals with some important subject matter, and Ava DuVernay has sort of been here before, but it just might not quite be as universally liked. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, early in the year, we all thought this was getting in, but it's kind of dropped off, and it's not feeling super likely now. Saltburn, I saw it. I loved it. It's not one of my absolute favorites of the year, and I do think it's going to put some people off, but I also think that maybe audiences are going to enjoy this a lot more than critics are. Everybody I saw it with at the Adelaide Film Festival had an absolute blast and was blown away by it, more so than me, who was looking at it through maybe a bit more of a critical lens. So it's not going to be Promising Young Woman, but don't completely count Saltburn out. I think people are going to really enjoy it. It may just not be an Oscar thing. All of Us Strangers is really good. I think it's probably going to end up being this year's Aftersun. In that it could maybe sneak an acting or a screenplay nomination, but I really don't think it's going to go much further than that. I liked the film, but I wouldn't consider it one of my favorites of the year. Priscilla got quite good reviews, but Sofia Coppola doesn't really translate to Best Picture, and it's just kind of on the cusp now. Boy and the Heron, really well liked. I got to see it at TIFF, and I absolutely loved it. But it's not even Miyazaki's most acclaimed film, and he's never made it into Best Picture before, so I don't see this year changing that. May December, I had a great time with it. I really do not buy it as a big awards player outside of acting, so I don't think that's going to get in for Best Picture. Rustin has that big Best Actor contender, but it doesn't have the reviews. The Killer, I think The Killer could go home empty-handed by the end. It's pretty good. It's David Fincher returning to his roots, but I don't think it's going to be an Oscar thing. Iron Claw is an unknown. I'm really, really excited for the film, and I have it on the cusp in a couple other categories, but it seems like they don't have a ton of faith in it, and I know some people who got to see it early and really, really loved it, but it seems to not be a priority for A24 in terms of campaigning. Asteroid City, I've given up hope on Wes Anderson getting love here outside of Budapest. It's one of my favorite films of the year, but I really don't think it's going to do much at the Oscars, and Ferrari's just there because it's Ferrari. I promise I'm not going to talk for that long for every single category. Now we come to Best Director, and this is kind of just a who's who from the Best Picture lineup. Nolan, Lanthimos, and Scorsese, I think, are your... Nolan, Lanthimos, and Scorsese, I think, are your three locks. Nolan I think he's a bigger lock to win director than the film is picture. I also think Lanthimos could win. He's who I would personally vote for, but I would be pretty happy with Nolan winning too. Whereas Scorsese, I don't think he's going to win, but I think he will 100% be nominated, and rightly so. The other two spots are a little more up for grabs. I've been really confident in Greta Gerwig for a while. Not a lot of people are predicting her to get in, but I think what she did, like the way she took an IP and made it into something so beautiful and unique and humane and funny and colorful, I think it's an achievement that people are going to want to recognize, and I think it'll be a shame if we don't get a female director in this year, and I think she is the best bet. So I'm actually pretty confident in Greta Gerwig, but it's not like a lock. And then the fifth spot I have between Jonathan Glazer and Alexander Payne. By all accounts, Zone of Interest is more of a directing achievement than The Holdovers, but it could just come down to The Holdovers being like a top 5 well-loved movie in Best Picture, and it might just go down that way that he gets in. But we've always got that art house pick. Even last year when there wasn't a clear one, they still threw in Ruben Östlund for The Triangle of Sadness, which no one really expected. So until like sort of at the 11th hour, once the BAFTAs started happening and everything. So I'm going with Glazer for now because the last like 4 or 5 years or so, there's always that art house pick, and the Zone of Interest feels like a no-brainer there. But Payne could easily knock out maybe Greta Gerwig, or I think it's sort of those three fighting for 2 spots right now. if they really go big for Maestro, I would not be shocked at all if Bradley Cooper got in. There was a lot of outrage that he didn't get in for A Star Is Born, and that movie has a lot of fans. A lot of people really want him to be recognized for his directing as well as his acting, so definitely not ruling that out. Justine Triet and Celine Song are the two next best bets for female directors. I think Past Lives might just be too low-key to get Song in, but Triet is doing a lot of really interesting things stylistically with Anatomy, so that one I wouldn't be shocked by. The rest of these I don't think have much of a shot. Todd Haynes, because he's a name. Cord Jefferson. The film has a lot of style, but it doesn't feel like a director thing to me. Emerald Fennell, Sophia Coppola, and Tran Anh Hung for The Taste of Things, because apparently that film's just real visually creative and lots of great food porn in there. But honestly, beyond the top 9, I'll be shocked if anything else sneaks its way in. Best Actress, which is always one of the most fun categories to watch each year, and a lot of people didn't call it before the film premiered, but I kind of called at least a nomination. But I would predict Emma Stone to win her second Oscar right now, and she would be one of the youngest actresses to have 2 to her name, which would be really cool. I don't think it's a lock or anything, but just looking at the performances, and I've seen everything in this predicted 5 outside of Carey Mulligan and Maestro, but Emma Stone is the one that does stand head and shoulders above the rest for me, because it's such a complete, well-rounded performance, and it is maybe the best and defining performance in a career that already has multiple Oscar nominations and a win. So I think it would be an incredibly deserved win, and she's just been getting lights out praise from everybody who's seen the film, so I think she's a pretty good bet to have at number 1 right now. Lily Gladstone is not far behind, because you could argue that her character is shortchanged, and you could almost argue that she's supporting in it, but she's decided to campaign lead. But that has not stopped the onslaught of praise that her performance has received. She's in my personal top 5. I'm not as blown away by the performance as a lot of people are. I'm a huge fan of Lily Gladstone. She should have been nominated for Certain Women. I do think she was a little shortchanged by the material, but everybody else has been absolutely glowing about her, and she could even win, I think. I think everyone in this top 4 could win. Now we come to Sandra Hüller, who she has one Oscar clip in this movie it blew my mind. There's this argument scene. I very nearly have her as my own number 1 above Emma Stone. I don't quite, but they're my top 2. And I think everything I've heard about Carey Mulligan and Maestro is that she's exceptional. I think she should have won for Promising Young Woman, so she absolutely has a great overdue narrative, unlike Emma Stone. So if they really go big for Maestro, her and Bradley Cooper could pull off a double-double, who knows? But those 4 I'm very, very confident in getting nominated, and I think they all have a path to win. The 5th spot's a bit tricky, so let's open up the board. I've gone with Margot Robbie for Barbie. I think I'm kind of in the minority there, but I'm looking at all these performances, and I can't think of another one that has the passion behind it that Margot Robbie might, aside from probably Greta Lee for Past Lives. But if I think Past Lives is as flimsy as it is in Best Picture, I can easily see Lee just falling off because it is a subtle performance. I think she's phenomenal in it. But I'm going with Margot Robbie for now, just based on what a juggernaut I think Barbie is. But there's a lot of names who you could throw in here. Fantasia Barrino, we haven't seen her performance yet, but we're all expecting big things from it. But if I'm not predicting Color Purple for picture, I'm not going to quite put her in my 5 for actress. Natalie Portman from May December, she has one monologue in it that is some of the best acting you've ever seen. But on the whole, I don't think it's her greatest performance. I think she's excellent in it. But it's not something that sort of like redefines how we see her, that you have to nominate, considering she's already won and been nominated a bunch of times. I could see it popping up, but I don't think it's likely in terms of who could get nominated from that movie. Annette Bening in Nyad I haven't seen yet, but I was never really a believer in that one. A lot of people are just like, it's Annette Bening, she has to get nominated, she's overdue. But the movie isn't getting the greatest reviews, and I could easily just see it getting shut out as a whole, considering how strong the category is this year. A non-Best Picture or any other nominee film getting in, it happens in actress, it does, but I just don't really believe in Bening this year. Kaylee Spaney is apparently excellent in Priscilla, and I saw someone saying that the Venice Best Actress winners always get nominated, but she only won Venice because Emma Stone wasn't eligible, so I really I'm not reading too much into that, and it could just be a little bit more of a subtle performance. Anjanou Ellis-Taylor for Origin, I haven't seen, but I've heard very good things about her performance. Teyana Taylor, 1001, she's going to be the one everybody is crying out for. I haven't been able to see the movie yet, but apparently she gave one of the best performances in the first half of the year. And if anyone mounts like an Andrea Riseborough-esque to Leslie Grassroots campaign for someone, I could see it being her. And then lastly, I have Jessica Chastain for Memory, because I think the film recently announced that it will be campaigning for awards this year and probably releasing sometime in December. And I got to see it at TIFF. I got a photo with Jessica Chastain, actually, which was like the best moment of my entire life. She's really, really great in the film. And it would be deserved. I could see her maybe popping up for like a Golden Globe drama nomination, because the Golden Globes really love her, but it is a little understated, and it's probably too crowded for her this year. And there's not really anyone else I believe in, but who knows who's going to pop up. I'm exhausted and I'm only 3 categories in. Best Actor does feel probably the most cut and dry of all the acting categories, in terms of if I had to pick one where I'm going to choose the 5 straight off the bat, it's probably actor or supporting actor. But I think the winner's probably between this top 3. Most people are still saying Cillian Murphy. He's who I would like to see win. He would be my favorite lead actor of the year so far. Aside from Coleman Domingo and Sing Sing, but that probably won't come out until 2024. But everything I've heard about Bradley Cooper's performance is that it is pure Oscar bait. Apparently he has this 1 7-minute scene where he's conducting that is just like catnip for awards voters and just incredible. So most people are sticking with Murphy, but I'm going to go out on a limb and pick Cooper for the win for now, because he's got the makeup tie-in. It just seems like the type of thing they would go for. But Murphy is very much in the fight as well, and Coleman Domingo for Rustin. Everything I've heard about the performance, I haven't been able to see it yet, but it points to it being win-worthy. It may just be that the film isn't that well liked that could hold him back, and best actor more so than actress does correlate generally with best picture nominees. Giamatti for The Holdovers feels like a lock. He's fantastic in it. And Leo DiCaprio, I don't think he's the lock some people say. Most people come out thinking he's not as strong as Gladstone and De Niro in that movie. I do think he's really excellent in it. He's doing some of the same stuff we've seen him do before, which is maybe the caveat against it, but I do have a lot more faith in him than everyone else on this list. A lot of people are throwing in Jeffrey Wright for American Fiction. I think it absolutely could happen, but again, I think he's excellent, but it is a comedic performance. And it's not, he doesn't have the big like dramatic Oscar clips that anyone above him does. So I could really only see him getting in if people just decide to completely bounce DiCaprio. Andrew Scott in All of Us Strangers. If it came out last year, he probably would have taken that Paul Mescal 5th spot, and he is excellent in the film, but I just don't see it as a big enough contender to propel him in, because it's a much more crowded year this year. Joaquin Phoenix for Napoleon. I'm never counting out Joaquin Phoenix. It just remains to be seen what the film is actually like. Anthony Hopkins, Freud's Last Session. He'll probably campaign. Maybe he'll get a BAFTA nom or something, but he probably won't go much further than that. Barry Keoghan for Saltburn. I just want to say I thought he was phenomenal in it. People are not talking about his performance in that movie enough. He's on the Oscars radar now because of Banshees, but I just think, again, the field is too crowded, and his character is not as likable or sympathetic as he was in Banshees. So I think it's going to be more of an uphill battle to get it nominated, but I hope people talk about him because he's so good in it. Zac Efron for The Iron Claw is what I'm throwing in there. Again, it's a movie we don't really know what it's going to be. Matt Damon for Air. It'll probably be talked about by people for the whole year, but it doesn't really feel likely. Koji Akusho for Perfect Days. I would nominate him for sure. He won Best Actor at Cannes, but I could really only see this happening if Perfect Days was like a surprise player in, I don't know, picture or director or something. It doesn't feel likely as deserving as it would be. Kingsley Benadir for Bob Marley. The movie doesn't look very good, but you can never count out a music biopic performance. Terry Yu for Past Lives feels like it's not going to happen. Christian Friedel, Zone of Interest. Adam Driver for Ferrari. Peter Sarsgaard for Memory. Nick Cage for Dream Scenario is just a personal one because I would nominate him, but I don't think it's going to happen. So I wouldn't 100% count out any of the names on this list, but beyond that top sort of 8 or 9, it doesn't feel super likely. Best Supporting Actress in recent years has been really tough to predict, and I think this year is going to be no different. I've only really got 2 locks here. Divine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers, who I would predict to win right now, and out of all the contenders, she would be my favorite as well. She gives a really heartbreaking performance, and she's in many ways like the soul of the film, and I think people are going to want to recognize that. Emily Blunt for Oppenheimer, I could also see winning. I'm not as in love with the performance, but she does have that one incredible scene that just gets people on their feet, and I think she's 100% going to be nominated here. Where it gets tricky now is the color purple, because everyone's sort of predicting that double nomination, but if the film's not in Best Picture, I don't think it gets the double nomination, but there's no one else that I really have more confidence in, so I'm putting them both in for now. I think Danielle Brooks seems the more likely of the two, but Taraji P. Henson could easily get in too. And I think if the film's in Best Picture, that double nomination probably will happen because it's a somewhat weak field this year. The fifth spot for a lot of people seems to be between Julianne Moore for May December and Jodie Foster for Nyad. I don't think either film is going to be much of a contender outside of these actress categories. But I'm going with Julianne Moore for now. I haven't seen Nyad, so I can't fully comment, but I've heard kind of mixed things about Foster's performance, whereas Moore, I think most people think is really great in May December, despite not loving the movie. And I thought she was just as good as the other two performances. I was surprised to see some people counting her out because it's a real high camp performance, but I think she would absolutely be worthy of a nomination. So I've got her in by a hair. Viola Davis for Air, I do not think is impossible. She's in my personal five still, and if Air sticks around for maybe like a sneaky screenplay nom or something, she could easily go along for the ride. America Ferrera for Barbie, she has one of the highlight scenes of the movie. So while I wouldn't say I think it's likely, I think if they want to really go gung-ho and over-nominate Barbie, she could easily go along with it. Juliette Binoche for The Taste of Things is kind of popping up as a real contender. Apparently she's a real, gives one of her career highlights in that movie. And if it becomes that, sort of number two contender in international, she could pop onto the radar. And they do like to go with a surprise veteran nom in supporting actress sometimes. Sandra Hüller for The Zone of Interest. They've nominated an actress twice in the same year before. She actually just got a Gotham nomination for The Zone of Interest and not for Anatomy of a Fall. I wouldn't read super deeply into that, but if the field really weakens out, I could see them just making this the year of Sandra Hüller, which would be really deserved. Rosamund Pike for Saltburn, I think she's a riot in that movie. I just don't think the love for Saltburn is going to translate across the board. Penelope Cruz for Ferrari, a lot of people are predicting, but I haven't heard anything exceptional about that performance. Rachel McAdams for Are You There, God It's Me, Margaret was probably everybody's winner halfway through the year, but more performances have come along and usurped it. Claire Foy for All of Us Strangers would be really, really deserving. I just don't think the film is going to get there. Vanessa Kirby for Napoleon could be anything. And then I've just thrown in Erica Alexander for American Fiction. I've seen the movie. She is really, really good in it. I just don't think she's going to break into this field. Best Supporting Actor is the most stacked acting category I've seen in a long time. In terms of my personal favorites, I've got people at 10th who I would almost consider win-worthy, but pretty much everybody I think is predicting the same five. Gun to my head, I'm saying Robert Downey Jr. wins it right now. It just feels like the narrative and the love for the film and the performance have really coalesced into a winning narrative, and he's so prominent in the third act of that movie that he's what you leave it thinking about. I personally wouldn't nominate him, but it's nothing against the performance. It's just that there's such a crowded year, and there are ones that I like more, but he would be who I'm predicting to win right now. But I think anybody from this top three could win. Mark Ruffalo in Poor Things. If you haven't seen Poor Things, you are in for an absolute treat with this one, my friends. He's got it down to a science where every single thing he says in Poor Things is funny. The audience was in hysterics over him. He's absolutely amazing. Ryan Gosling, another incredible comedic performance. I think these three will 100% be nominated, but it's really hard for a comedic performance to get over the line and win, which is why I would say Robert Downey Jr. is going to take the cake there. Ryan Gosling is who I would give it to, but I'm starting to think he's just not quite going to win. He could, and I think he's actually going to win some Critics Awards because critics are not afraid to give these awards to comedic performances. Robert De Niro for Killers of the Flower Moon is pretty much a lock too. I think I just don't quite see him winning for whatever reason. I can't quite quantify it. The Academy haven't been in love with him lately, but I think it's probably his best performance in 20 years, and he's definitely going to be nominated. That fifth spot is a little up in the air. I'm I feel pretty good about it being Defoe. They're always doing a double nomination in supporting, and it feels like Poor Things is the one to do it with this year. And it's not just like Defoe's in it for 10 minutes, let's give it to him because he's a veteran. He's genuinely excellent in the movie and brings a surprising amount of heart to the proceedings. So a lot of people are going to want to recognize that. I think Ruffalo is the guarantee from that film, but I'm also quite confident in Defoe. But there are a lot of heavy hitters here. Charles Melton from May December. Even the people who don't like that film are highlighting him as the best performance in it, alongside Natalie Portman and Julianne Moore. I think he is really great in it. I wasn't as blown away by the performance as a number of people were, and I think he's sort of as good as the other leads, but it would be a very deserving nomination if it does happen, and I think he's the next most likely after Defoe. Coleman Domingo for The Color Purple, he could get that Sandra Hüller double nomination, or maybe he even falls out because people don't like Rustin, and if people love The Color Purple, they could say, let's nominate him for that instead. Dominic Sessa for The Holdovers is next in line. I've seen it. He is really, really good in the movie. It's his first film, and he's so impressive. So that would be a really deserved nom too. I think outside of that top 8, it gets a bit thinner, and beyond that, it's more speculation. Jeremy Allen White for The Iron Claw is one I really want to throw in there because the Oscar voting is going to happen around the time he's going to be winning Emmys for The Bear. So he's going to be on the radar, and if he happens to be really good in the film, he could be someone that pops up in voters' minds, but that's a real speculative pick. John Majaro for Past Lives was initially a favorite, but I simply think the category's gotten too crowded, and when I saw the film, I thought that's not an Oscar performance. He's really great in it, but he's so low-key and subtle. I just don't think it's going to happen for him, unfortunately. Jacob Elordi's having a real moment, so I'll throw him in there for Priscilla, but are we going to do Elvis 2 years in a row? Probably not. Matt Damon for Oppenheimer. I'm still not ruling it out, but I don't think it's likely. Sterling K. Brown for American Fiction. A lot of people are like, I don't know, I haven't seen the movie, but apparently he's good. I have seen the movie, and he is really, really good in it. He just has such a commanding presence, and he's such an interesting and flawed character. I just think it's too crowded this year. Glenn Howerton for Blackberry. We're not going to be shutting up about this one all year, myself included. Myself and my friend and podcast co-host Jaron are big on the Glenn Howerton needs an Oscar nomination bandwagon. He's in my top 5. It's just not going to happen. The movie is too small. The studio doesn't know how to campaign. He'll probably get some critic nominations. He got a Gotham Awards nomination. He's going to be talked about the whole way through, but I don't think it's going to translate to the big awards bodies. Jamie Bell and Paul Mescal for All of Us Strangers. Again, in a less crowded year, maybe one of them could get in. I think Bell is probably the highlight for me, and Mescal's on the Academy's radar for now, but it's crowded. And Ben Affleck for Air. Every year, Ben Affleck has a movie that people are like, could he get nominated for this? And he never does, but I'm throwing him on the list. Screenplays. Best Original Screenplay. I've been saying Barbie would win since it came out, and I'm sticking to that. Even when Barbie was in the more competitive adapted race, I still predicted it to win there, so I'm not going to change my mind now that it's an original. You may not agree, but it is the type of film that wins screenplay. It always goes to either a fun, creative, genre-y film. They like to give it to something with a bit of comedic flavor. They like to reward directors who wrote the movie themselves, and they like to reward it to a top-tier Best Picture contender that doesn't really have a shot at winning Best Picture. I'm talking about stuff like Promising Young Woman and Jojo Rabbit and Get Out, these genre movies by auteurs, and I think Barbie ticks every single one of those boxes this year. And how awesome would it be to give Baumbach and Gerwig an Oscar together? I'm already imagining the speech now. So Barbie, I'm pretty confident that that is my number one. The Holdovers, Past Lives, and Anatomy of a Fall, very confident that all 3 of those will be nominated. Then the 5th spot's kind of up in the air. I'm taking Maestro for now because it's the biggest contender across the board. And Josh Singer is a writer who's written a lot of great scripts and a lot of like biopics and Oscar-friendly scripts. So I think Maestro is a pretty decent bet here. Even I know a lot of people have issues with the script, but I don't think that's really going to translate to Oscar voters if they go for the movie overall. Air could absolutely happen. It's such a fun screenplay, and it's definitely going to pick up something along the way. And we don't have the Writers Guild Awards. They just announced that they're going to be happening after the Oscars, so it's going to be a fun category to speculate. May December's absolutely an option, but it's very campy and silly and off-putting to some people, and it's not going to get a solo screenplay nomination, so it would need to get at least a couple of those acting nominations to really be considered here. Saltburn would be a very cool pick, but it's more a film about the directing and the vibe and the acting than it is the screenplay. Napoleon, again, we don't really know what it is. The Iron Claw, those are two things that maybe if they come out and people really like them, they could shoot up. Rustin, probably not going to happen. Fair Play, a lot of people want. I don't think it'll happen. And Dream Scenario, that's just my personal pick. It's sort of the type of movie that it's really weird and cool and existential. It should get nominated, and then it just doesn't. Adapted screenplay, I'm also kind of going against the grain right now and picking Poor Things as my winner, basically for all the aforementioned reasons. They like to give it to the fun, creative adaptation, and Tony McNamara is someone who's been killing it for so long, and the favorite losing to Green Book for screenplay still stings, and I would like to think that the Oscars will rectify that, but it's a very crowded category. Killers of the Flower Moon, I think, is more likely to win than Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer has a great script, but I think director and picture will be enough, and the dialogue is really not like the highlight of that movie, whereas Flower Moon is a lot more didactic and wordy, and I think that one has a pretty good shot to win too. American Fiction, I think, is a lock to get nominated if it really performs well. If it comes out on nomination morning with like a picture and an actor nom, maybe we could start talking about it to win, because it does fit those sort of genre comedy movie boxes, but I think it's definitely going to get nominated. The fifth spot, like original, is a bit more of a crapshoot. I'm going with All of Us Strangers, and that to be its lone nomination, because it is a very dialogue-heavy film. I think The Zone of Interest could easily happen. It doesn't look to be super dialogue heavy, but I think people are just so impressed by the structure of that film that I think it sounds like it'd be a worthy nomination. Priscilla's adapting a book. It's a biopic. Can't count it out. Color Purple doesn't... The musicals they don't always go for in screenplay. Origin, Are You There, God It's Me, Margaret, and Spider-Man. Nothing else outside of this list I really see having a shot. Cinematography, I think you can just sort of lock in Oppenheimer and throw away the key at this point, especially with no Dune this year. It's Hoyt van Hoytema doing some brilliant stuff as always, and I don't see why it wouldn't win. Poor Things I have very close second. It's doing a lot in terms of cinematography. I've seen a lot of people have issue with how much it uses fisheye lens. Not me. I think it's awesome, and I would vote for it to win, but I think Oppenheimer is stronger here. As with a lot of categories in this big three, I think Killers of the Flower Moon's a lock to get nominated, but I just don't quite see it winning. Maestro, I'm throwing in because it's black and white. I don't know if the whole film's black and white, but a lot of it is. I can't actually remember, but they love black and white. And I think it's Matthew Libatique, who's a very good cinematographer, so I feel like that's a pretty good bet. And then the fifth one, I'm going out on a little bit of a limb and saying Saltburn. Having seen the film, I think if it's to get nominated for anything, it would and should be cinematography. It is a phenomenal looking movie. Linus Sangren's a really great DOP, although he should have got nominated for Babylon and didn't. So if they don't like the movie overall, this probably won't happen. But in terms of it being a crowded field, I'm just going to throw it in there for now because it would be really deserving, and it's doing so much cool shit with lighting and everything. The Zone of Interest easily could happen. I've heard very good things about it. Ferrari, racing, action, Michael Mann, got to look at it. El Conde, I don't think the film's... I didn't actually like the film, but the cinematography by Ed Lockman is excellent, and it's black and white. They love black and white. Color Purple, can't count out the musical. Napoleon could be really strong. We'll see. And then Barbie and the Holdovers, I've just got there to fill in a couple more Best Picture nominees. I don't really see them happening. Now, costume and production design, if you asked me 2 months ago, I would have said lock away Barbie and throw away the key, but now we have a genuine two-horse race for both of these between Barbie and Poor Things. I'll be really surprised if something other than those two movies wins here. And I'm predicting a split between the two. So for costume design, I'm going to go with Barbie. It's Jacqueline Duran, who has won before and is a really... Whereas Poor Things, it's a relative newcomer. Not that that should really sway it, but I think if I'm splitting the two, I think costumes goes to Barbie just because of the breadth of costumes that are there. The way they've recreated so many Barbie dolls and the original outfits. Every character has such great, unique outfits. There are so many costume changes, and I think it's a pretty good bet to win. Poor Things could easily win. I guess it's not quite as new. It is typical period gowns and all that sort of stuff. Incredibly well done, but I think Barbie is maybe something a little different and fresh that we don't always see. Kills the Flower Moon, I think you can just tick the box for that. The Color Purple I'm sticking with. I think even if it's not a Best Picture contender, it's a pretty good bet to get in here. For that fifth spot, it really could be anything. I'm throwing in Napoleon. I've sort of got Napoleon like at fifth or sixth in a lot of categories, just depending on how well it's actually received, but it looks like he's going to have some really great elaborate outfits in it, which could be enough. Oppenheimer could just get thrown in if they want to over nominate it, and they haven't been above nominating like dudes in suits movies in the past for costume design. I think it would be kind of silly, but it also wouldn't shock me at all. Maestro could happen, similar position to Oppenheimer, dudes in suits, but just good like period accuracy. Wonka, I think, would be a really cool nomination. The outfits look like they're going to have a lot of flair. Priscilla, obviously, Elvis is in it, like, come on. Chevalier looks like it has really astonishing costumes. It just, no one really saw the movie. I didn't even see it. And Saltburn I'll throw in there just as one last thing. Then, as I said, I'm predicting a split between production and costumes. I think Poor Things should be a lock to win production design. It's exceptional. They've created such a unique world. It's like it mixes period and futuristic settings, these sort of otherworldly versions of these cool European cities. It's really has to be seen to be believed. It feels like Yorgos has made a Terry Gilliam movie, and I think I'd be pretty surprised if this didn't win production design. I think Poor Things could win both, but if I'm betting the house on one, it's production design. Barbie, obviously very close second. Kills the Flower Moon, tick that box. Oppenheimer, tick that box. Really, really great the way they built Los Alamos. It's really, really impressive what that movie does. And then fifth spot, I'm throwing in The Color Purple, but it could be Napoleon. It should be Asteroid City, but I think French Dispatch just proved that if they don't care about a movie, they're not going to nominate it even in tech categories, even when it's really deserved. Maestro, similar position to Oppenheimer again. The Zone of Interest, I've heard, could be that Parasite type nomination where the production design is not like super noticeable, but what they do with it is so perfect for the film and the story being told. So it's gonna be one that I think gets talked about a lot. Wonka, similar position to costumes. Ferrari and The Creator, which would be deserving, but similar to Asteroid City, I just don't think they're going to care about the movie enough. Now, best film editing, there are sort of two key rules here. There's a big best picture correlation and there's a big best sound correlation. We haven't gotten to sound yet, but I think Oppenheimer is going to win both of those categories. Even if it doesn't win Best Picture, I think I would even vote for it for editing, and it's not quite in my top 10 films of the year. But what it does with like those sequences and the way it jumps forward in time, and it feels so smooth and natural despite how much it's jumping around and the things we see in Oppenheimer's head. I think the editing really, really stands out in that movie, and I've got Poor Things second, again, just based on the strength of the narrative, but I don't think it's quite the winner, and there's also been some criticisms leveled at it that it is a bit too long in the second half. Killers of the Flower Moon, I think will still get in despite the 3.5 hour runtime. I think it's really sort of well-paced the way that film chugs along, and I was never bored. Maestro, I think, is also doing some non-linear stuff, which could get it in. And here's where the sort of best picture correlation comes in. There are probably 9 or 10 movies that I could throw into those last two slots. The Holdovers could happen. The Barbie could happen. Ferrari could definitely happen. They love car racing movies, and I'm predicting it to get into sound, which would follow that rule. But I've decided to just go with a couple Best Picture movies in Maestro and Anatomy of a Fall, which not everyone's predicting, but I think that film does some really, really creative editing in the way it deals with unreliable narrators and flashbacks and, whose perspective are we from? Who's telling the truth here? I think it has some really, really great editing across the board, and if it is embedded in Best Picture, I could easily see editing coming along with it. Barbie could happen if it's a top 3 or 4 Best Picture contender. American Fiction moves along in a really fun way. The Killer, it's David Fincher. It's really well edited. I'm just not expecting that film to be a contender. And then a couple others rounding it out. Best makeup and hairstyling, I think, is a two-horse race between Maestro and Poor Things. I'm going with Maestro because it has that best actor correlation. Brendan Fraser last year won for The Whale, and that film won makeup. So if Maestro takes home makeup on Oscar night, we could be looking at a Bradley Cooper win, but I still think it could win makeup without the best actor win because he's just doing all kinds of prosthetic stuff here. I wouldn't rule out Poor Things because what Dafoe does, like what they did with his face, is so striking, and I think if they don't go as high on Maestro as I've predicted them to, Poor Things could easily win makeup as well. I think Guardians Volume 3 should be in there. The first movie was nominated, the second made the shortlist, and in a year where not a lot of blockbusters are contending for awards, I think there's a lot of great alien stuff that this film's going to do. I'm throwing Barbie in there. I think it does a lot of great stuff with hairstyles if they want to reward that side of the coin, and I've gone with Naiad for that fifth spot, but there's a lot of contenders here. I've gone with Naiad because it does have prosthetics. They use a lot of prosthetics on Diana Naiad, and they do look at this stuff and they get shown reels and everything, so it could even take that home as a lone nomination. Wonka I've got on the cusp in a few categories, as do I with The Color Purple. Priscilla is going to have a lot of really great hairstyles. Oppenheimer, if they really want to over-nominate it, it could jump in here as well. I think Gold is exactly the type of film that'll end up on the shortlist. I just don't know if it gets nominated unless they really get impressed by like the demos that they get shown. The Iron Claw, I think there's going to be some interesting prosthetic work going on, especially with Zac Efron, so look out for that one. And lastly, I'm throwing in The Hunger Games, A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I also would look out for that in costume design, but they've never nominated a Hunger Games movie before, which is why I'm a little hesitant to predict it, because those movies have always had really great costumes, and the Oscars have just never cared. Best Original Score is always a category I'm really invested in, and I've got a top 4 here that I'm very confident in, and then the fifth spot could be a lot of things, as with most categories I've got here. I think Oppenheimer's winning. Like, that score's everywhere. I think that's the type of score that's going to be like played in football stadiums before games. It's been in so many different memes and TikToks and all that. Like, it is blown up. It has gained a life of its own outside of the film, and I'll be really surprised if it doesn't win that. Killers of the Flower Moon, I think they're cowards if they don't nominate it. It's the final score from Robbie Robertson, and it's really fine work from him, so I really hope that gets nominated. Poor Things, it's a first-time composer in Jerskin Fendrix, which could be a barrier, but it's really good music, and if it is the top 3 movie that I think it is, I think it'll have to go along with the ride. And then you usually do get an animated one in there, and I think Elemental is the one this year. Heard really good things about it. The fifth spot, a lot of people have gone cold on Spider-Verse getting the score nom, but there's so much stuff here that I just... until something else jumps out, I'm keeping it in that fifth spot. The Boy and the Heron is another big animated contender. I think it is my second favorite score of the year behind Poor Things, but they've never nominated Joe Hisaishi before, as deserving as he's been. So unless the movie really turns into a juggernaut and looks like it's going to win animated feature, I don't think this score is quite going to make the cut. Past Lives is one that people have talked about all year, but it could just fall by the wayside. The Zone of Interest, Micah Levi, apparently is one of the best scores of the year, but it's very minimally used, which hurts it. And the only time they've nominated Levi was for Jackie, when the score was very heavily used in the film. I'm really excited to hear this one. It just might not quite come off. The Killer, you can never rule out Reznor and Ross. American Fiction has a really fun jazz-infused score. Asteroid City, they love Alexander Desplat, and I think he's got a couple things this year. The Society of the Snow, I'm seeing pop up as a pick for a lot of people. It's Michael Giacchino doing it, which, again, you can never count out. And then Hans Zimmer for The Creator, which I thought was really great, but they may just not care about the movie. Best Original Song is a really tough one to predict this early in the year, because sometimes a lot of movies will have songs that don't even have names yet and everything. But I've gone with like a sort of educated guess of a 5. Barbie has officially submitted 3 songs. What Was I Made For, I'm Just Ken, and Dance the Night. I think they're all really strong, but getting 3 songs in this day and age is a really big ask. It hasn't happened since about 2007, and every time it does happen, they change the rules to make it even more difficult for that to happen. I don't think it's impossible, But if I had to pick two from the movie, I think it's What Was I Made For and I'm Just Ken. I really want I'm Just Ken to win, but What Was I Made For feels like the friendlier pick. And it's an incredible song in its own right. And they're far and away my two favorite movie songs of the year. Road to Freedom for Rustin feels like a pretty good bet by Lenny Kravitz. There's always in these sort of social activism movies, there's always like a big call to action song and it usually gets nominated. And so I feel okay about that one. This Wish from Wish, I had to listen to it while I was making these predictions. And I could, as I was listening to it, I could literally like picture it being performed on the Oscar stage. So if Wish does get that animated feature nomination, I think that song will probably go along with it. And then the fifth spot's just the Diane Warren slot. I would go with Gonna Be You from 80 for Brady, but if you're not initiated, Diane Warren gets nominated every year, even for movies no one's heard of. She just has this magical art of campaigning. There's a couple options. I think she has a song in like the Flamin' Hot Cheeto movie. And there's also a documentary about her, but it doesn't look, I don't know if it's going to come out this year, so I'm hesitant to predict that one. So I'm going to take the 80 for Brady one for now, but you're a fool if you don't predict Diane Warren for a nomination in any given year. Dance the Night, I think, is close, and I'm not ruling out the triple nomination there. There's going to be a new song from The Color Purple that could pop up. Again, the Diane Warren doco. Quiet Eyes from Past Lives, a lot of people really love, and it could be sort of that low-key, everything everywhere, this is a life type nomination. For the first time from The Little Mermaid, I listened to it. It doesn't really have that much of an oomph, but it's definitely the biggest contender from that movie. Still the show from Elemental. Peaches would be a very fun meme pick, and the movie's very popular and the song's very popular. I don't quite think the Academy will bite, and then I think Wonka has a song too, and I'm sure more things will pop up as the year goes on. Best sound, I think you can lock up Oppenheimer. It's one. It's going to win editing and sound, I think. I've got Ferrari in as a close second because they love vroom vroom car racing movies. I wasn't quite confident enough to put it in editing, but I think sound, I'll be shocked if it doesn't get in. And like normally I would say it could win, but I think Oppenheimer really is a juggernaut in this category. Killers of the Flower Moon is going to do what The Irishman did and tick every box without really looking like a winner. Maestro I'm throwing in because it is a film about a composer and stuff. Tar didn't get in, but I think Maestro is just going to have a bit more appeal in the craft categories. And I'm going with The Color Purple for the fifth slot because it is a musical. Napoleon could be really impressive. Again, I've got it like 6th or 7th for a lot of these tech categories if it ends up being a player. The Zone of Interest could be one that they want to throw in if they really like the movie. Across the Spider-Verse, it's not the only animated film to get in for sound this decade is Soul. And I don't quite see it for Spider-Man. The Killer has wonderful sound. Do they care about the movie? Gran Turismo, another racing movie. The Creator, another really technically impressive movie this year. Poor Things if they want to over-nominate it. And Mission Impossible. A lot of people are predicting Mission Impossible, but they never nominate those movies. Fallout was so incredibly deserving and it got nothing. So I don't have a lot of confidence in that getting in the way some people do. Visual effects is always a tough one to predict until we get the actual shortlist, but I feel pretty good about the top 3 here. I think The Creator could win this. I know I don't think they're going to care about enough for other categories, but with Dune exiting and for what The Creator did with an $80 million budget, it's some of the most impressive visual effects I've ever seen. And I'll be really disappointed if this doesn't win or even like somehow misses out on a nomination. And the visual effects branch, they really do care about nominating the best stuff instead of the best movies. So I think The Creator's got a good shot here. I think Oppenheimer, I might not have predicted this like 6 months ago, but I think it's probably going to get in just because it's not a super strong field. There haven't been a ton of great blockbuster type movies this year, and the minimal effects that Oppenheimer does have, if they want to really recognize the in-camera practical stuff it does, I think it's pretty likely. And Guardians 3, one of the best looking MCU movies in quite some time, and the MCU usually gets one in, and weaker movies than this have gotten in, so I think it's a pretty good bet. A lot of people are jumping on the Poor Things train here, and I'm joining them. It's not full of visual effects, but there's a lot of great stuff in the background, like the way the cities are designed and the ships and boats and everything. And I think there might just be enough there for people to want to throw it in with what a big Best Picture contender it is. And then fifth spot's a real everything up to like number 11 I could see really taking this spot. The Little Mermaid I'm going with because those live action Disney movies get in quite often. People don't really like this one too much, but it's as good a bet as anything at the moment. Napoleon, they really like war movies and they tend to fare pretty well here, so that could happen. Rebel Moon I'm keeping an eye out for. I'm not always impressed by Zack Snyder's visual style, but a lot of people are, and by all accounts, this is going to be a really interesting looking sci-fi fantasy type thing, and I'm really curious to see what ends up happening with it. A lot of people thought Spider-Man was going to happen early in the year, but it's so hard for animated films to get into this category, and I just don't think it's going to crack it. Mission Impossible, ditto what I just said about it. Transformers is one I could see like making the shortlist and then like potentially getting in because it does have quite good visual effects. Aquaman 2, if I'm throwing one DC movie in, I'm going to pick that one. I think The Flash has terrible visual effects, and if it gets nominated and I'm filming a reaction video, I'm probably going to fucking break my camera. The Marvels and Indiana Jones are rounding out the list. We're almost done. We're just down to the three last other Best Picture categories. We've got Best Animated Feature. I think it's a two-horse race between Spider-Man and The Boy and the Heron. Spider-Man is maybe not the juggernaut it looked like when it first came out, but I still think it's the favorite to win. But The Boy and the Heron could build some steam once more people to see it. I'm interested to see how American audiences respond to it because it hasn't played at a ton of places yet. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles I'm really bullish about. A lot of people aren't, but I think that movie's so well received and so entertaining and great for kids and adults alike that I'm weirdly confident about it. Wish I'm going to throw in there. Now let's show the whole board because most people are putting Elemental in this slot, but it's kind of like Lightyear. It doesn't quite have the reviews. It had really good legs at the box office, but I could easily see it missing out. I don't think Pixar is like the guarantee it was 5 to 10 years ago. So I'm going to back in Wish to maybe take that spot. And then people have seen Chicken Run Dawn of the Nugget. It does have quite good reviews, so I won't be surprised if that one gets in there. Stop motion, the Oscars are usually pretty friendly toward. Elemental's really close. I think Super Mario is close and could be propelled in there on box office alone, but Illumination generally don't do so well here. Nimona is my second favorite animated film of the year behind Boy and the Heron, and it would be so deserved, but I don't know if enough people really watched it or care about it, and I'm curious to see what some of the precursors do with this category. Sometimes we do get a foreign one jump in there, and I think the best bets here are The Peasants and Suzume. Shinkai is really, really popular, so Suzume, you can't count it out. The Peasants, I managed to see at TIFF, and I really, really liked it, and the animation itself is so impressive, but it's a very bleak and difficult movie to watch, and just getting people to sit down and watch it might be a challenge. And Robot Dreams is the last one I'm going to throw in there, but something could pop up, who knows? Now, documentary feature is always one of the hardest categories to predict. They often snub the frontrunner. I'm not going to like get all creative and try and predict what frontrunner gets snubbed. I'm just going to predict them at face value for now. And they've already announced the Critics' Choice documentary nomination, so I'm kind of pulling from that and pulling what people have been saying about each movie. But the top two clear for me are American Symphony and Beyond Utopia. And I don't know if American Symphony is on everyone's radar yet, but it's a documentary about John Batiste. I think it was originally supposed to come out last year. But it's Netflix. It's by Obama's production company, which has won the award before, and it just got like 6 nominations at the Critics' Choice Documentary Awards, so I think it's a pretty good bet right now. And Beyond Utopia, a documentary about defecting from North Korea, has some of the best reviews of any doco this year, and those two are absolutely my front runners here. 20 Days in Mariupol, I feel quite good about. It's a combination of being up for foreign film as well. It did well at the documentary awards, and it sounds like it's a pretty good bet. Still a Michael J. Fox movie. We keep predicting these like actor or director profile like portrait of a human type movies, and they don't often get in, but this one has really good reviews, so until the precursors really outline big contenders, I'm keeping it in. And then from here you could throw a dart at a board and pick anything from The Eternal Memory, Stamped at the Beginning, The Deepest Breath. These 3 films were all nominated at the Critics' Choice Documentary Awards. Four Daughters could be a foreign film contender as well, And apparently it's a really interesting mixture of documentary and narrative and everything. The Pigeon Tunnel, I believe, is by Errol Morris, who is one of the most acclaimed documentarians to ever do it. Silver Dollar Road, I hear very good things about. Anselm is by Wim Wenders, if they want to really make it the year of Wim Wenders here. And Kokomo City is just a doco I've heard very good things about, and I'm very excited to see. Best international feature. Now, I actually do feel pretty good about this 5, but again, once the shortlist happens, who knows what could miss. But I think The Zone of Interest is a good bet to win this now that France didn't submit Anatomy of a Fall. But I'm not joining the chorus of people saying, France are idiots, they fucking ruined everything. They might not win now, but I do think The Taste of Things is pretty likely to get in. I haven't seen it yet, but it is a crowd pleaser and it makes sense why they submitted it. And I think people are really going to enjoy it when it comes out. So I'm pretty confident in that one. Perfect Days. I've seen it twice now, and it's a film without much of a plot, but it's not alienating people. And it's such a nice film that I think you'd be hard pressed to not come out of that film feeling moved and with a big smile on your face. It's certainly my favorite foreign film so far this year. The Teacher's Lounge is one I've heard very good things about. I've had 2 opportunities to see it and didn't, and I feel really stupid, but I think that's a pretty good bet. And then 5th, I'm going with Society of the Snow from Spain. It's by J.A. Bayona, who is sort of kind of a pretty well-known filmmaker and has very, very good reviews. I'm really excited to see it. And then there's a lot of stuff you could throw in. The Promised Land from Denmark has Mads Mikkelsen, who's always going to be a big draw card. Totem is Mexico's submission, and it's been one of the better reviewed foreign films of the year. Fallen Leaves by Aki Kaurismäki from Finland. His films are often just very dry and maybe don't get enough passion behind them to quite get in. The Settlers, Chile's submission, which they went with over El Conde, which I wasn't really a fan of, so maybe the right call. But The Settlers, I didn't particularly like either, but everyone else I talked to who saw it at my city's film festival really, really loved it. So I'm not going to rule it out as a contender. About Dry Grasses is going to be one of the most acclaimed films of the year, but it's 3 hours long and very slow, and I don't quite think they're going to vote for it. 20 Days in Mariupol and Four Daughters are the documentary crossover that we sometimes get. And then The Monk and the Gun I'm throwing in because Bhutan shocked everybody with getting Lumana a Yak in the Classroom in. So I'm just, let's keep an eye on Bhutan over there in the corner. And that's it for my predictions. Just real quick in terms of nomination totals, I've got Oppenheimer winning 7 and Poor Things winning 3, between 12 and 13 nominations. I've got Killers of the Flower Moon getting 12 nominations with no wins. And I've got Barbie also clearing that 10 nomination mark with 3 wins. And there's the other splits that you can see there. But I definitely think Oppenheimer and Poor Things are the big dogs here. And there are a few categories that I think they're competing head to head in. So it could easily look like 5 versus 5 instead of 7 versus 3, because it's not very often a film comes along and sweeps with 7 wins. Everything Everywhere did it, but I absolutely believe Oppenheimer could do it. And I think picture and director and supporting actor are the main categories where they're competing head to head. And I've currently predicted Oppenheimer for all 3 of those, but who knows if even 1 or 2 of them swing a different way. But I will be surprised if either of those 2 or Killers gets less than 11 nominations. That is it for another video, in my first video in quite some time. So I made up for the gap by making it a really long video. So thank you so much if you've stuck around for this whole thing. I hope I've helped you see the state of the race so far with a bit more clarity, and I'm really excited to see what some of these precursor awards start doing. We'll get our Oscar shortlists in December, so I may hold off until then to do my next predictions video. But thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. When that may be, I don't know. Again, because my creative attention's been diverted in a lot of directions lately. But once again, I just want to shout out my podcast, The Film Draft. We have new episodes every Monday, and we love doing it. So really go subscribe to us there and follow to our Instagram page. I think you'll really enjoy listening to it. Follow me on Instagram at Jacob Watches Films. That's where I post so many movie reviews for so many of the films I've talked about in this video. You'll find reviews of over on my Instagram page, and you can find me on Letterboxd as well, where you'll find all of my reviews. That's it from me. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. Happy awards season.